In the years following the now famous exchange, political consultants began urging their clients to study Representative Jasmine Crockett's approach. As one Republican strategist told Politico, the old method of dominating and interrupting your opponent no longer works. Not when they know how to use your behavior against you. Crockett had proven that preparation, discipline, and composure can easily outweigh bluster and aggression. Her impact spread beyond politics. In journalism schools, professors began teaching the hearing as an example of how a heated political confrontation can be transformed into real accountability. Crockett didn't just create a viral clip, said Columbia Journalism School's Emily Bell. She used Miller's conduct to reveal the human consequences of his policies. That's not just communication, that's leadership that rises above partisanship. For the families separated at the border, the moment was deeply emotional. Many said they finally felt acknowledged. Watching that hearing, I felt seen for the first time, said Maria Santos, whose young son had been taken from her years earlier. For so long it felt like no one cared. But when Representative Crockett spoke, she made us feel heard. Support groups for separated families began showing clips from the hearing during therapy sessions. Psychologists noticed a meaningful shift. Witnessing public accountability, even symbolically, helped families begin to heal. It wasn't legal justice, explained Dr. Louise Zeus, a therapist who treated separated children, but it gave them validation. Seeing someone in power acknowledge their pain has real therapeutic value. 3 years later, the hearing's legacy was still strong. Crockett's now iconic line, "Your legacy isn't strength. It's the sound of children crying for parents they were torn away from," had become one of the most quoted statements in modern political history. It appeared on murals in classrooms and in political speeches condemning inhumane immigration practices. By then, Crockett had become one of her party's most sought-after voices, a rising figure known not just for passion, but for substance. Despite her growing fame, she remained grounded in policy work. She sponsored multiple bipartisan bills on immigration reform and child welfare, often saying, "Every bill I write, every speech I give, I think about those children. They deserve better. We all do." Meanwhile, Stephen Miller's career faded into the background. Attempts to rebuild his public image through editorials and interviews fell flat. The image of him sitting silent before Crockett became the lasting symbol of his downfall. In every retrospective about his career, that moment was remembered as the turning point, the day his influence began to collapse. For American democracy, the message was unmistakable. Truth, preparation, and moral clarity can still triumph over aggression and cruelty. In an era often filled with political noise and theatrics, Jasmine Crockett reminded the country that calm conviction still has power. Her poise and precision became a blueprint for holding leaders accountable. What made her response so powerful wasn't just her words, it was her restraint, her patience, and her ability to let his conduct expose itself. She didn't raise her voice or trade insults. Instead, she connected his dismissive behavior to the real-world suffering caused by the very policies he defended. Observers later broke down the 7 key moments that shaped that historic exchange. Her first question about documented trauma, her effort to cite internal memos, her polite request for respect of her allotted time, her reference to health and human services records, her mention of her civil rights background, her composed silence through 6 interruptions, and finally, the line that ended the debate and cemented her credibility. "Your legacy isn't strength, Mr. Miller. It's the sound of children crying for parents they were torn away from." That statement echoed far beyond the hearing room. For anyone facing an opponent who mistakes loudness for logic, Crockett's example became a guide. Don't meet aggression with aggression, meet it with calm truth. Let their behavior reveal their character, then respond with facts and moral strength. The influence of her example continues to ripple across politics and culture. Young professionals study the exchange as a model for handling disrespect under pressure. Law schools use it as a case study in witness management. Political scientists refer to it as a turning point in how congressional oversight can reclaim dignity and order. Most importantly, the families who suffered under those policies finally heard the words they had long waited to hear, that what happened to them was wrong, deliberate, and deeply unjust. Crockett didn't just win a hearing, she gave voice to the unheard, dignity to the dismissed, and hope to those who felt forgotten. In an era where volume often overshadows truth, her victory stands as proof that composure and integrity still matter. Her triumph shows that no matter how powerful or loud a figure may seem, truth and accountability will always have the final word. As America continues to confront the legacy of those painful policies and push toward a more just future, the lesson from that day remains clear. Those who interrupt truth to avoid accountability will eventually be interrupted by truth itself. And when that moment comes, all their noise collapses beneath the weight of moral clarity. So, as we reflect on this defining moment in American democracy, ask yourself, will we use our voices as powerfully as Jasmine Crockett used hers that day? The answer will shape the kind of country we choose to be. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay engaged, and never let anyone interrupt your truth. Soon after the hearing, clips of the tense exchange began circulating widely. Across offices and online spaces, people started sharing personal stories about being interrupted or dismissed at work. The moment became more than just a political flashpoint. It turned into a cultural lesson. Corporate diversity and inclusion trainers began using the video in workshops, calling it a textbook example of how everyday disrespect can grow into something much larger. Dr. Kenji Yoshino, director of the Center for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at NYU Law, explained it best. This is what we mean when we talk about small acts of dismissal turning into systemic exclusion. Miller's constant interruptions, he noted, were more than discourteous. They were an attempt to undercut a sitting congresswoman's rightful authority. Crockett's calm and precise response, he added, should be required viewing for anyone studying how power dynamics work in real time. Within just a week, the political impact became clear. Stephen Miller's reputation inside conservative circles took a sharp downturn. Several candidates quietly stopped asking for his support, and the high-profile speaking engagements that once filled his calendar began to disappear. His once commanding influence was suddenly fragile. At the same time, the hearing reignited public focus on one of the most painful legacies of the previous administration, the family separation policy. The issue, which had been fading from the headlines, returned to national discussion. The Biden administration quickly announced new actions to help reunite families still separated by that policy. Lawmakers from both parties began debating new proposals to make sure such a practice would never be reinstated. Representative Jasmine Crockett used the attention not for personal gain, but for progress. Instead of leaning into viral fame, she turned her energy toward real reform. She introduced the Family Protection Act, a bill banning family separation at the border except in verified cases of abuse or trafficking. The proposal drew bipartisan support, a rare sign of cooperation in Washington, and began shifting the national conversation toward compassion and accountability. Beyond legislation, Crockett began mentoring young women entering public service, especially women of color who often faced similar obstacles. At a leadership conference in Houston, she told a group of young women, "That moment in the hearing wasn't just about me or Stephen Miller. It was about every woman who's been told to stay quiet or wait her turn. You deserve to be heard, respected, and empowered to challenge those in power." Her message resonated across the country. The exchange also renewed investigative interest in the government's past immigration actions. Inspired by the documents Crockett revealed during the hearing, journalists filed new public records requests. Within months, whistleblowers came forward, adding new details about how the separation strategy was developed. 3 months later, a report from the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General confirmed much of what Crockett had presented. It found that officials, including Miller, had been repeatedly warned about the emotional and psychological harm of separating families but continued regardless, believing it would deter illegal crossings. Miller tried to defend himself with an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal, accusing Crockett of seeking publicity over policy. The attempt backfired. Critics called his essay defensive and evasive, ignoring the documented evidence she had placed in the record. Year later, their exchange remained a major topic of discussion. It was featured in an award-winning documentary on U.S. immigration policy, with Crockett and several affected families sharing their experiences. Miller declined to participate. The documentary reignited national empathy for separated families and sparked conversations about ethics, compassion, and leadership in government. Academics soon began studying the incident in classrooms. It's a powerful example of how calm preparation and moral conviction can prevail over aggression, said Dr. Jennifer Lawless of the University of Virginia. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She used the moment to highlight truth. The influence of that hearing spread in surprising ways. During later congressional sessions, witnesses who tried to use the same combative tactics as Miller were quickly stopped by committee chairs. "We're not doing Miller interruptions here," became a common phrase whenever tempers rose. Outside politics, women across industries began sharing what they called their own Crockett moments, situations where they turned disrespect into strength. The phrase, "pulling a Crockett," entered popular vocabulary, describing someone who responds to confrontation with calm authority and facts. For Stephen Miller, however, recovery never came. His base of loyal supporters remained small, but his standing in mainstream politics was permanently damaged. Once a key voice in shaping national policy, he found himself limited to sympathetic podcasts and fringe events. His influence diminished. Legal consequences also followed. Several lawsuits filed by separated families cited Crockett's hearing testimony and the documents she presented. In a major court ruling, a federal judge referenced the exchange, writing, "As Representative Crockett demonstrated, the harm was not accidental, it was a conscious decision." 2 years later, Crockett released her book, Uninterrupted, Speaking Truth to Power in America, which became an instant bestseller. The chapter describing the hearing drew national attention. In it she wrote, "That moment wasn't planned. I had my notes and my questions ready, but when Stephen Miller interrupted me for the 6th time, I realized something deeper. His interruptions weren't just about me. They mirrored what his policies had done to thousands of families. Parents separated from their children, lives torn apart, entire communities living in fear. When I finally spoke, I wasn't just defending my time. I was speaking for every parent who was silenced, every child who cried themselves to sleep wondering where their family had gone." She concluded with words that would be quoted for years to come. "You can interrupt our words, but not our truth. You can speak over us, but not silence justice. You can control a moment, but never stop accountability." Her book reignited discussion about immigration reform and inspired renewed civic engagement. As her popularity grew, speculation about her political future followed. Talk of a Senate run or even higher office. Crockett brushed off the rumors, saying simply, "I'm focused on doing the job Texans sent me here to do. If I do that well, the rest will take care of itself." Over time, the Crockett-Miller exchange became more than a viral clip. It became a symbol of a new kind of political strength. It proved that power doesn't always come from volume or aggression, but from clarity, composure, and conviction.